part of the Another Realm Media Network. Coming up in this episode.
We've learned this, or they've acknowledged that, or we've seen this, or we've seen footage of something flying on camera on my TV in my living room, and I saw it change shape, and it's from a valid source. And what a fantastic development that is, versus perhaps where we were a generation ago and beyond. And there'll be another one. There will be another one at some point in our lives. So hopefully I've got a long time left to go, and yourself, that there will be that next F-18 gun camera footage. There will be that next thing. There will be that next politician who says, actually, there's this. It will come. But it's controlled, isn't it? It's a controlled leak.
Yeah. I do think that, to use... maybe like Star Wars as a reference. Star Wars modeled after the hero's journey type writing style. Luke finds a truth in that his father was not killed. For anybody that's not seen Star Wars, I'm sorry, I'm about to ruin it for you. But his father was not killed by Darth Vader, right? His father is Darth Vader. He learns that truth. But that truth leads to the next question. Well, but why did he become Darth Vader? So I think what you're saying and what I'm saying is the same thing. There will be small truths that are revealed along the way, but each one sets up the next question. Okay, let's say that the government comes out and says, yep, little green men have been visiting us for thousands of years. Great. Why are they here? Let's go spend money and figure that out.
See, this is because you've been reading quantum physics. This is the mind and the language of a scientist, that you're not supposed to ever know the answer.
Right.
You're seeking the answer to a question, which will allow you to ask the next question.
Yeah.
And so I think that I'm going to now make the point that I think I cut you off from probably making, which is, if you acknowledge that, yes, they're here and this is what they look like, then the next question is, well, where did they come from?
Right.
We don't really know that. Okay, well, how can we find out?
How can we find that out? Right. Welcome to this episode of Mysterial Experiences, where we delve into the heart of mystery and the ethereal. Today, we invite you on a voyage through shadowed realms of the unexplained. From spectral whispers to cosmic enigmas. Join us as we explore tales and phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality, in a quest to uncover truths hidden in the fabric of the extraordinary. Prepare for a journey into the unknown, where each revelation is a step closer to unraveling the mysterious. We have Mark L. Watson with us here today. But Mark is an author. He's done some things within the mixed media space, electronic music, which I didn't know about. I'm interested to know about that myself because I'm an electronic music person. I actually prefer it over a lot of other music. I think the words get in the way sometimes. But and then also a fellow podcaster. And I would say, go on a limb and say UFO enthusiast. So welcome to the show, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Great to be here. It's finally great to see your pretty face after years of being in touch. We've obviously worked together for the past few years on various bits and pieces, and so it's great to finally be sitting across from you.
So for those that catch the marker at the beginning of the show, you would have heard that my podcast is part of the Another Realm Media Network. And a few years ago, Mark was doing a podcast called Peer Beyond the Veil, which is a fantastic podcast title. Fantastic. In fact, I was out in ChatGPT when I was trying to come up with what the name of this podcast was going to be, and I was asking it for some suggestions. And the one that it suggested was Peer Beyond the Veil. So it should feel comforting to know that AI suggested that I should use your podcast title.
Well, that's great. I can also honestly say that it predates ChatGPT.
That's right. ChatGPT stole from you and made the
Yeah.
suggestion.
Well, the algorithms are obviously right then, aren't they? So.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So
It's actually terrifying. I don't know how much time you've spent on Chat GPT, but whatever you task it with, it blows me away. It really is. I mean, it's a
oh
chapter of the
yeah,
day, but terrifying, kind of exciting but terrifying prospect.
there's the show that I do with Stefan and our friend Santosh, Astral Stew. We spent one episode talking about the ethics of AI. And that was a great conversation because that's one of the big talking points, I think, from an AI perspective. Of course, everybody always brings up Terminator, but we're way far away from that ever being a
Yeah, of
realistic
course.
situation. But I think we are definitely seeing an issue with kind of I don't know, advanced plagiarism, if that's a thing. But just because you think about AI is just a large database of works that other people have produced, and it's pulling from those things to produce whatever you ask it for. And so, in a way, it is plagiarizing work. But then, in the same regard, if I read, a book, and then later in discussion, I reference something I read in a book, am I plagiarizing that work? If I don't recall what book I read it in or who wrote the book, is it still plagiarism? It just,
Yeah, of
at
course.
some point in
There's a
time, you
big
got to,
issue in schools with teachers being completely unable to tell when a student
right.
has written, their homework, their assignment, and when it's come even in part from an AI
You know what?
platform.
You know
See
what's
how it's
funny?
becoming a real headache.
Well, you know what's funny? So they say that because I'm currently working towards my master's program in psychology, and it's an online program. And they have a thing that you have to watch in the beginning of the program about using AI to write your papers. And it says they'll know because they can look at your cadence of what you submit in
Right.
non-paper format and compare the two to know if it's truly written by you or not. But here's the kicker: you can go to AI, you can go into Chat GPT, submit something that you type,
Oh no, and it
and
will
say
follow the pattern of your
learn the cadence and the rhythm of my typing,
Oh no.
and program yourself. And we're going to call this the Josh Rutledge methodology. Now I can go into the same chat. You have to be within the same chat dialogue, and I can say,
Right.
write me a paper on X using the Josh Rutledge methodology, and it will apply the same cadence and rhythm to the writing as you would.
It's mind blowing.
So,
Absolutely mind blowing. It's the most impressive thing I've
yeah.
possibly ever seen. But
So
what headaches we have laid out before us, we are just starting to figure out what a pain in the backside this might be.
Yeah, I mean, I think because of the little tweaks that you can do, like I just mentioned, to get around the way that we're thinking, you almost have to use AI to discover AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, then you get into a whole nother ball of wax. But anyway, that's the AI discussion, and I'm that's
a rabbit hole for
that's a whole nother can of beans.
Yeah.
But it certainly does make you think around what our creativity is, like humanity's creativity, the arts that we've created, etc., the plays, the books, etc. If a programmed AI system can create similar, not necessarily to negate our work, but I think it really makes you think about what we are as humans. Are we some form of artificial intelligence?
It brings into question whether the human brain, this isn't something I necessarily ascribe to, the human brain is merely a computer itself. Now, again, I think it isn't. I think it's more than that. But it's only using the algorithms which you know yourself.
Right.
There are things that this creatively works, and it works because I know this pattern, this experience,
right.
Things I have witnessed elsewhere. I have listened to music, so I know what music should sound like. Well, That's no different to what it's doing.
When you think about people who channel, right? I do occasionally, although I've kind of changed it up for myself a little bit. But people who are an open channel, that is to say, they're receiving messages from somewhere else and they're conveying that information to you as the listener. The limitation of what they can convey is within the context of what their mind has experienced, right? If someone wanted to, if an intelligence wanted to communicate through them some modality that they had never even thought about or fathomed or whatever the case may be, it wouldn't be able to. It would have to convey it to them in terminology they can understand. Therefore, whatever you receive from a channel, whatever message you receive from a channel, is filtered through the lens of their understanding.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I'm part of in our town, there's 5, 6, 7 of us who are in a kind of small philosophy collective. We meet kind of every once in a while for the Philosophist, we call it. So it's the dinner party, too much wine and chats about philosophy. Yeah. And actually, we were lost for hours only last Wednesday, talking about something very similar and about how we're always limited in how we can explain something, how we can articulate a thought. We can only use our own language, and that's why sometimes they say a painting or a picture speaks 1,000 words. That's how sometimes we can say, we'll try to define what love is, and you kind of almost can't think of the word because we're limited by, as you say, our own words we know, the vocabulary we know, and it's quite a good kind of philosophical test.
If I ever come out to visit, I would definitely like to be involved in one of those conversations. So that's
I get lost. There's some academics in there.
Yeah, that's right up my alley.
Every now and again, and just tuck into the mailbag. But
but anyway, so shifting gears just a little bit. I think still within the general realm, but so I want to talk just a little bit about experience with the things that I am classifying as part of this podcast as the mysterial, which, I created my own word because I didn't think there was one really that existed, because you still break it up into paranormal and supernatural and UFO and Sasquatch, but mysterial, I think, encompasses everything. And so when it comes to anything in the mysterial, are there some experiences that you've had yourself personally that you would care to share or talk about?
Which define well, so in a word, no. Okay. But let me kind of go into that a bit more. In a word, no. I believe I've seen a UFO. Actually, quite recently, 2 or 3 years ago, I was with my wife and her father, who's an ex-policeman, for what validity that brings. Late at night, it was almost a pinprick of light. We didn't see any more. It was just the light, but it was moving in the most irregular, swinging from side to side, stopping, moving, all the classic. But it was just the pin of light. So, for me, that must be a UFO, because what else could it be? It's not a helicopter, it's not a plane, it's not a satellite. It could have been like a drone, but it was in the heavens and it was at night. So no drone flies that high. So for me, that was a UFO experience. But by that point, I don't think that really changed fundamentally the way I saw anything, because at that point I was already looking into the abyss. So while my answer in terms of personal experiences of the paranormal sits at a no, really, if I have to go. What has kind of led me almost down this road is witnessing the rather seismic shift in acceptance and acknowledgement of all of the above. So I touch on this a little bit in I've got an upcoming film coming up that we can chat about later. I touched on this at the beginning, how when I was a boy, and I'm the ripe old age of 40, so I go back 4 decades. And when I was young, I was always into it, as I'm sure we all were, and as I'm sure nearly all your listeners probably were. And back then, it was just fringe. There were many books, there were many authors, there were many people who brought it out of the shadows into the limelight temporarily, and then it would fade. But it was a fringe, and you were ridiculed. And should you be the kid at school who would say, "Oh, I believe in UFOs," or "God forbid, I've seen a UFO"? I remember a boy telling me, and when I remember back now, his description was fascinatingly accurate. And he swore blind he saw it. But back then he just got mocked, ridiculed, to the point where then he just stopped telling people. And that was how it was. And if you thought you'd seen a ghost, kids would say, "Oh, wow, tell me your story." But then if you swore blind you'd seen that ghost, eventually you'd just get laughed at, right? And that's where we've been for most of human history, really, until I would say very, very recently. And so it was probably only 5 years or so ago, I started seeing, I guess, a lot more of it has come in recent years through two things. One, cable TV, which is largely very, very poisonous to the paranormal thing, because it fills a lot of the wider public's awareness with things which aren't true, things which are fabricated, and it creates entertainment out of it, which is fine as entertainment, but it ends up muddying the water of the truth behind it. So, but at the same time, whilst muddying the water and being largely poisonous, it has brought a lot of this into the wider kind of zeitgeist of today's people. And the other thing is, and this probably goes without saying, but I think it is almost underestimated how important, is the internet. And I think this is, you might have had somebody who 20 years ago, I mean, we had the internet 20 years ago, 30 years ago, who maybe had some really weird, anomalous, strange personal experience in Bolivia. And then somebody who had the same experience maybe in Malaysia, and somebody who had that experience in Serbia. Well, they might have gone to a library, they might have found books, they might have written about their own experience, but they would have remained disparate. And now all of a sudden you have the Bolivian and the Serbian and the wherever else I said, Malaysian, able to kind of find each other in an online capacity and say, "Hey, do you know what? That really weird thing that you always thought only happened to you, it happened to me.
Yeah.
So maybe we can band together and maybe we can see if there's something to this." And so all these, I'm trying to explain now the history of the internet, which is needless to do, but all these sub-communities started to spring up. And then I think what we've seen kind of that blossom into is now it feels like everybody's finally all together and we're all starting to pull the same direction. So there's always been this quest for truth as to the UFO phenomena. Everyone involved has always sought to get disclosure, to speak to governments, to speak to militaries, to speak to NASA, who knows what. But it's easy to quieten people down because it's a little group here, a little group there. Now it's not. Now it's a global community who are all on the same page, looking for the same answers at the same time. And I think that for me, all of a sudden I realized, like, can I swear? Can I swear?
I thought, like, is that a question? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought, like, shit, what a time to be alive, as cliched as that might sound. Like, we're at a point now where I feel something's about to give.
Yeah.
And so, to go back to your question, no specific experiences of mine, but a lifetime of growing up and just being pushed to the curb, and now realizing we don't have to be pushed to the curb anymore. Now we've got the ear.
Yeah, I think that I've talked to both on like program sites like Facebook and Reddit and other places. There does seem to be kind of an overall feeling that like the levee's about to break on this topic. I though, being kind of a realist, I don't think that it's going to happen. And I don't want to sound like a negative Nancy, but just because, so I think that if it happens, it'll be the governments of the world starting from 2017 forward saying, yeah, we don't know what this is. We're going to figure it out, and making zero acknowledgement to anything prior to that. Because for at least the major powers of the world, to acknowledge things that happened prior to then would open a doorway of, yes, we've had secrets and we've kept them from you for 50, 60, 80 years. And now we're going to reveal the secrets, but only as they pertain to UFOs. That, I think, would cause too much concern and distrust from the populace of whatever the government is to then say, well, wait a minute. You've had 80 years worth of history on this topic. What else have you been hiding? Right? So I think whether it be the US, the UK, Russia, China, whatever the case would be, I think if they come forward, it'll be from a point closer to the future, closer to now, where they say, yeah, we had these discoveries too, and then we launched on a path to figure out what they are, and they will give nothing to whatever is in the background. Because, we've got, of course, over here, we've got all kinds of cases of Roswell and everything else in the U.S., but you all have things in the U.K. The one that took place outside of the military base in the 50s.
In the forest, Rendlesham.
Rendlesham, thank you. But, I'm sure there's been others as well that the government have been involved in, and, they just kind of went away.
It comes down, though, to the question of course, it comes down to the question of how much they know, whether they, I say they, what I mean by they is either independent nation governments, independent national governments, or national militaries, and I would say probably more militaries than governments. So we have an election every few years,
right,
and a new government comes in. And to be honest, the state of British politics at the moment, we've had 3 or 4 prime ministers in the last 5 years.
Right.
They rotate. So the same in the States. You have a president who, there's probably the NSA are saying, I don't think we need to tell this dude everything, because in a few years he's going to be back out and the next guy will be coming. So when we say governments, I don't even necessarily mean the top dogs, but areas of government or of military. And how much they know. And I think part of it is that the fact that they don't know anything. Oh, not anything. I think they know incredibly little. I think they do know there's something to it. I think they do have knowledge of contact, potentially crashes, potentially crash retrieval. And they reverse engineered the technology. Yeah, maybe there's a lot of argument to say that that they have, but I wouldn't want to put my marker down too tightly.
I don't know that they're reverse engineering to the point where we have fleets of craft in the fighting battles on Mars. I just don't know, because I feel like if that were that's a lot of people to keep quiet, and that's like somebody would have gabbed by now if that was the case, and maybe they already have. And Corey, totally blanking on Corey's, but the guy that said he was the space Martian that got kind of like age regressed back to the 80s, and then but maybe he's on the level, I don't know. But the number of people that would have to be involved for that type of operation, for reverse engineering UFO technology, I just don't know that they would be able to keep a lid on it as much as they have, perhaps.
But I think that probably also applies to just the entire thing. I think for us to have been aware since the 1940s or before, Grush was talking about Mussolini's government in collaboration with the US, the UK, Australia, Canada, New Zealand. Is that the five nations?
Right.
Helping them do crash retrieval, and then the states kind of commandeered the Italians' ownership of it. And there are at the very least hundreds of people involved in that, and maybe more. I mean, this isn't like 2 or 3 guys from Canada and 2 or 3 guys from the States. I mean, like,
Right.
you must have teams involved, and
True.
maybe it's no basis, but there must be, to have got to today, there must be thousands and thousands of people worldwide who are keeping their mouth closed, and a couple who are blowing whistles. But
Which,
we're doing very well that there are not significantly more, or they're doing very well, should I say, that there are not significantly more people blowing whistles, because a lot of people must be keeping their mouths closed.
but you know that in and of itself, um, let's tease that out a little bit. So let's assume that there are 3,000. Let's just give it a number: 3,000 people worldwide that are keeping their mouths shut. Why? Many of them have probably retired already. You know, the why don't we have more deathbed confessions? You know what? It just, not necessarily to say that it didn't happen. Although, you know, you could take that side of the argument, is that we don't have these things because it didn't happen. But you can also take the side of the argument of, is it because they have some understanding of how detrimental to society it would be for it to come out? And that's why we don't have those confessions.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's very, very valid, and I think there's been quite a bit come up recently about the concerns. If you look at this from the most kind of accepting perspective of it, that it is all true, and that it's run by a race of extraterrestrials, ultra-terrestrials, beings, whatever you want to call them, that there might be a threat involved, and that the whole reason it's been kept under wraps is because as soon as it becomes public knowledge, there's no there's no reason for them to stay in the shadows anymore, and then all of a sudden, the attack might begin. And again,
yes,
the furthest end of that scale, but somewhere between that end of the scale and the other end is the truth. I mean, yes, that might be a little bit far-fetched to look at that end of it, but you just need to scale it somewhere back this way, and you are going to land on what the actual situation is, which is they do know something. They absolutely do know. If not what they are, then they do know where they are. Mm-hmm. They know where they've crashed. They know a history of militarily linked contacts over the years. You only need to go into places like South America and look at what the Brazilian government, the Chilean government, the Bolivian government have said 30 years ago. They came out publicly a long, long time back and said, yeah, of course, contact, and here's this and here's that. The Indians, the Japanese, even the Chinese, even CCP, with all their controls now, have a publicly facing investigation department. That's not all just come from US pressure. Right. That's a global movement towards at least acceptance.
So,
if not,
if you so let's follow that trail a little bit. So if we go down that path of saying, we look at all these countries of the world who have these programs, who have had them for, some of them in your case, example you gave, some of them for 60 plus years. Is it a progression towards a reveal? Is it a snowball, gradual, kind of building towards some sort of larger reveal? Or is it just simply an attempt to own something, or take ownership of something that has the potential to be just a great, I don't know, to trigger in humanity a great awakening, if you will, in our place, in our own societies, in our world, in our solar system, etc.?
It is undoubtedly largely the latter of those two. It is. Is it, going to the former, is it a step, however large or small, towards a greater reveal, towards disclosure, whatever you may term it? I think the hope is that it is. I think my opinion is that there's 206 nations or whatever on the planet.
Right.
As much as we live in our very kind of Western world, English speaking, US, and Europe centric world, there are literally billions of people who live in other parts of the planet that do not look at what's going on in the US Congress. They do not look at what's going on from UK investigators and from a French author and from a German TV crew. Like they're their own side, and I think there's this phenomena is a global thing.
For sure. Yep.
If you remove just our Western perspective on it, then the pressure, let me try and articulate what I'm trying to say. The pressure that we currently feel that we're putting on the government, on our government, shall we say, are irrelevant to the pressures that the Chinese might feel they're under, that the Indians might have. So if anybody had any knowledge, we're not just leading our government towards what is maybe potentially a reveal, because what's stopping the Chinese, for example, from revealing what they know, the Russians from revealing what they know? So either there's a global understanding that nobody say anything, or nobody knows anything. There's nothing to say, because otherwise somebody would have probably said it. And so I think they know it's true. I think they know they're here. But I don't think anybody knows enough to say, okay, we'll make the call on this one. These are ... Right. Because no one knows.
Yeah. It is. So it's kind of like we're going to stand up this office of investigations, and it has an address and a phone number to give the appearance that we genuinely want to help figure out what this is. But if you try to come to our office, it's actually a UPS store. It's a single mailbox, in a UPS store. And there's an old guy on an actual typewriter sitting there typing out memos to be sent to the press.
Yeah.
So it's I mean, I think that a lot of times, especially, and I don't want to get too far into world politics, but I think a lot of times, there is an idea of a leader nation and then the following nations, but the concept here is that oftentimes the nation who thinks they are the leader, the ones who are influencing, are actually being influenced by the followers. And so it's just an ever-growing kind of like the Ouroboros type thing, where it's like the snake eating its tail of this cycle of influence. And so the U.S. has maybe taken recognition over the last probably 5-6 years because of the recognition that other countries gave it, and vice versa. So
and the US is undoubtedly a leader nation, of course, in many fields, and certainly in this, certainly in its research and its technological capabilities, in its its military, in its astrophysics, in its astronomy division. You are global leaders, at least one of the small few. But the fact is, if a craft had crashed in Uganda, and the Ugandan government, plucking a random country out of the ether, here, and the Ugandan government had retrieved a downed crash, is there enough influence that the US will say, you, Uganda, are not saying anything about this, and we're taking this crash. We're taking this craft, and now you're not saying anything. Or why wouldn't the Ugandan government say, look at us, we've just found a UFO, everybody,
Well, and it's but along those same lines, you look at the Brazil incident in the 80s that Fox covered. Supposedly, the Brazilian government came in and got everything, and then they turned it over to the U.S. and the U.S. took over. So
and they voluntarily did that as well.
And so there does seem to be some sort of a pecking order, if you will, for who takes control of these crafts. So maybe if something did crash in Uganda, somebody from the U.S. would say, you can't talk about this. And they'd say, okay, because you're the de facto expert on UFO stuff. I don't know.
You're right. Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I don't know, but you're absolutely right in that point for sure. Yeah, go like the Mussolini one that Grush was
Right.
talking about. That
You look at
together for retrieval, but eventually it just became US
right.
owned.
You look at supposedly the stuff that was to be developed by Germany in World War II, the flying bell and those types of things. And then all the scientists that were a part of those projects came to the U.S. Project Paperclip, and so there does seem to be some sort of an indication that I don't know that the U.S. has somehow earned they're sitting on the council representing the Earth and the Galactic Federation or something. I don't know.
I just kind of to bring this full circle, it just means there are so many people keeping their mouths closed.
Yeah, for sure. And it's people, with the exception of those like Lou Elizondo and Grush, and I'm sure there have been others. I mean, the astronaut, sort of like Mitchell, he was a big proponent of the things that were supposedly happening on the moon, Edgar Mitchell, and then he, of course, he's dead now, but Buzz Aldrin, I believe, has been a big proponent about the stuff that was happening on the moon and wants to know why we haven't gone back. So I think there are others who are speaking out, but aside from the New York Times article in 2017, for the most part, the media ignores it. Because I think ultimately most, and I'm trying not to make broad, but I think most mass media has shifted from the idea of bringing people information they need to selling advertisements. And so they cover the stories, which is going to get the most people to tune in so that they can sell them Metamucil. And so because of that, you have, I think, little smaller media agencies now popping up with the rise of the internet and social media and such. You have these little agencies popping up, but for some reason, even they are reluctant to cover the topic. I think News Nation is probably
what's changing, Josh, is we're no longer reliant on the output of controlled media, because now I'm talking to you and you're sitting there in Phoenix and I'm in the country outside North London and we're talking, and I would love to think there's a whole load of people out there listening to us talk who are then going to go on and talk, so we have become a source of information and media now, and no one's going to shut us down. I mean,
so they could. The Men in Black are going to knock on your door. So,
and I think, again, bringing this even bigger full circle back to what I said at the beginning, that actually I think this internet revolution, albeit not in its infancy anymore, has brought too many people together for it to be made quiet now.
I think, though, that there is a danger, and then you mentioned a little bit about it earlier, in the number of fake videos, pictures, sightings, almost of a counterintelligence nature. Seemingly, I don't want to be too conspiracy here, but seemingly some sort of a organized, counterintelligence type operation to flood social media and other places with fake accounts and fake videos and fake pictures. And people who I don't know that I could trust him today. I question it a lot, but people like Richard Doty, who, as their career in the military in the U.S. was professional counterintelligence. I mean, that's what they did was, try to put this topic in the gray space as much as possible. And now he's retired and supposedly revealing all the secrets. And I question how someone can be a professional liar for most of their life, and then now all of a sudden they're starting to tell all the truths. And so I wonder if that's even a counterintelligence, position as well. So I think that the danger lies in is that because there are so many people like us, podcasts on this topic have grown significantly since I started doing it 5 years ago. And I'm sure it will continue to grow. The number of people, though, that are talking and the people that they're talking to, I think there is a little bit of a concern that in the media, journalistic media, there's an idea that you're vetting your source, right? I don't know that podcast hosts vet their source, or if they just see, here's somebody who has a sensational thing that they're going to talk about, and it's going to get me listeners, and I'm going to be able to sell Metamucil. So,
yeah,
so there's still a concern, even in the kind of decentralized media, that there's not a push to make sure that we're all on the level, so to speak, on the information that we're presenting and the potential validity of that information.
And I think it's largely not. I mean, I think if you were to somehow have the ability to, maybe ChatGPT can do it, to take every podcast episode on this and transcribe them all and pick out every single anecdote and every single piece of information, and then somehow press a button and validity check them.
Right.
You might find that nearly all of them are, for one reason or another, nonsensical. Maybe they're if we look at UFO claims, reports, you will have a great deal, the majority will be mistaken identity. You will have a lot of people who are in it for not quite the fame, the wealth, the fortune, but attention, perhaps. Right. You'll have people who will absolutely, even under hypnosis, swear blind they saw it because they did see it in their. But right. Again, it was mistaken identity. They're not lying; they're telling the truth, but they're just mistaken.
Right.
But you're only going to need one or two, not even 1%. Like one report needs to be true,
right,
for the whole thing to be true. And it's so difficult to tread through this kind of endless, dense forest of trees where only one in every 1,000 trees is the one you want, and right. and you just can't see through as to where that truth is. But you just have to have faith that there's truth in it. Otherwise, I hate to use all these kind of cliche terms, but you throw in the baby out with like just this endless thing of filthy bathwater, because there's so much dirty bathwater that it should all just be thrown away. But somewhere in there's a nugget of something, and it can't be discarded.
It makes me. I was talking to another group this past weekend. We were talking about. It was a group of folks from MUFON. We were talking about why we search. I don't know that I'm ever going to crack the case. I don't know if you think that you're ever going to crack the case. So it becomes a question of, why do we search? Why are in my signature that I send out to people to have them on the podcast, I call myself a seeker of truths. But I think the point of seeking is not necessarily in finding the truth about whatever it is you're seeking, but in finding truths about yourself in the process of seeking it. And so I think that, I have certainly grown in my understanding of a number of different things, both in the mysterious world as well as in just mundane world. I mean, I'm reading books about quantum physics because I want to understand how it may apply, to the UFO space or to ghosts or whatever the case may be. So, I mean, in a way, the seeking of the truth about the topic has caused me to grow in my knowledge, my understanding, my complexity of my, the way that I see myself, etc. So if the end result is that I will never know the answer about UFOs, but in the process of getting to the end result, I am a better person. I'm a better father to my kids, a better husband to my wife, a better friend, a better associate, whatever the case may be. Was it worth the journey? And I think it was.
You're in it for the journey.
Yeah.
Not the destination.
Right.
Because really, on the back of all this, it almost seems such a shame to say, and it seems quite a blunt thing to say, but I mean, you've got to be realistic. The chances are me and you will both move on to our next realm without ever finding out the truth. I mean, that's just the long and short of it. We might get a step further. We might reach a point where you think, oh, how fantastic it is that we learned this, or they've acknowledged that, or we've seen this, or we've seen footage of something flying on camera on my TV in my living room, and I saw it change shape, and it's from a valid source, and what a fantastic development that is, versus perhaps where we were a generation ago and beyond. And there'll be another one. There will be another one at some point in our lives. So hopefully I've got a long time left to go, and yourself, that there will be that next F-18 gun camera footage. There will be that next thing. There will be that next politician who says, actually, there's this. It will come. But it's controlled, isn't it? It's a controlled leak.
Yeah. I do think that, to use maybe like Star Wars as a reference, Star Wars modeled after the hero's journey type writing style. Luke finds a truth in that his father was not killed. For anybody that's not seen Star Wars, I'm sorry, I'm about to ruin it for you. But his father was not killed by Darth Vader, right? His father is Darth Vader. He learns that truth. But that truth leads to the next question. Well, but why did he become Darth Vader? So I think what you're saying and what I'm saying is the same thing. There will be small truths that are revealed along the way, but each one sets up the next question. Okay, let's say that the government comes out and says, yep, little green men have been visiting us for thousands of years. Great. Why are they here? Let's go spend money and figure that out.
See, this is because you've been reading quantum physics. This is the mind and the language of a scientist, that you're not supposed to ever know the answer.
Right.
You're seeking the answer to a question, which will allow you to ask the next question.
Yeah.
And so I think that I'm going to now make the point that I think I cut you off from probably making, which is, if you acknowledge that, yes, they're here and this is what they look like, then the next question is, well, where did they come from?
Right.
We don't really know that. Okay, well, how can we find that?
How can we find that out? Right.
Yeah. Or why are they here? Well, we don't really know why they're here. Maybe it's this and And
so the way that I am progressing in my understanding, that is making me a better person, we as a society will progress in our understanding and make us better as a society. And so really, maybe that's what all they're here for, is to give us a question to seek the answer to. And in the process of doing so, we become better than we were before.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a lovely kind of summary to it. I think coming from it, to slightly kind of add to that from my own background, I come from a media background, so I come from a kind of more of a journalistic standpoint. So while the little boy inside of me agrees and concurs entirely with the point you just made, and that really is the long and short of it, for that part of me, for my soul inside of me, what you said applies fully. For my kind of outward-facing professional side of it, there's also part of me that thinks, I feel like I know of something. Truth's the wrong word, because I don't know the truth. But I feel like I have my eyes open to things which more people should have their eyes open to. I am asking questions I wish other people would ask. I wish when I went out for dinner with my friends and they say, I didn't still get, even today, how's all that thing about the ghosts and the Bigfoots that you're doing? And I tell a story and they all kind of smile at each other like, this guy, And I have to say, guys, okay, again, 99% of this might be BS, but you've got to ask these questions. Stuff's going on here or stuff's going on there. I feel like I have my eyes open wider than a lot of people do. And so that creative side of me, the journalistic side of me says, okay, that little boy in me who keeps asking questions has now also turned into a guy who wants to broadcast this to a wider audience to say, hey, listen, general people, you all should be listening to this and asking these questions. So, all right, it might not ever come to an answer, but I want more people to be opening their minds and paying attention and watching what's going on and doubting what you're told and unlearning what you've been taught. You know, you've got to be ready to unlearn what you've learned. And nobody does that. Our world's full of sheep, and that's not even a detriment. The world needs to be full of sheep. There's no problem in that. But it frustrates me. I wanna grab like every single person and say, open your eyes.
Yeah.
You know. So that drives what I do. As much as the search for truth is there, I also, as I just said, I'm very unlikely to ever find it. Truth's not even a thing. I mean, as you said, a series of little truths on the way, but the grander truth, no, of course not. But I want other people to be just paying attention too, you know, and nowhere near enough people are opening their eyes and paying attention.
Mm-hmm. That's my drive. And I 100% agree with that sentiment. And that's honestly why I do this podcast. And I've done other podcasts and other shows, because it's the want to, for something that I take from my youth when I was, my parents would drag me along to various churches and things, and we would have, there would ultimately be some pastor that would come in and he would say, witness to every person you come across, because you never know, the person you talk to, they might go off and cure some disease. And they will have done so because you planted the seed of whatever the case may be. And although I don't necessarily agree with most of what they were talking about now in my life, I do like the concept that there is an element of placing a seed of discovery. And so if your mates that you have dinner with, they may, rib you about whatever it is you're talking about, but you're still talking about it, and it's planting that seed within them so that maybe one day they will have an experience that they just can't understand, and when they need somebody to talk to about it, they'll know who to go to. Yeah. And I think, at the end of the day, we are a connected people. I compare us as humans more to the redwood trees in California than as individuals, right? And so we are a connected people. And the more that we share in our connectedness and understand that, I think I could be so bold as to say that majority of the people on the planet have had an experience that goes outside of normal, that they are just, for whatever reason, unwilling to talk about. The only way we lift the taboo is to talk about it.
And it's incredible now. I've started on this kind of, this isn't the beginning of my journey at all, but it's certainly the beginning in the last 5 years or so of broadcasting my journey. And so while I've been interested in these things for my entire life, now all of a sudden, old Facebook friends, old school buddies, old work colleagues, now they're going, oh, I didn't know you were into this. Hey, I had listened to your show about the whatever. It's incredible now how many of those people who I've known for decades, I've now said, did I ever tell you about that time whatever, or I saw that, or my mum once saw this. Now, as you just said, everybody's now coming to me in my, my little social world, because, these are all the people who I already know. And now it's incredible now how many times I get a text message from a friend or a colleague saying, you won't believe what my mum saw at the weekend, or, I just got a message from my aunt, and she was just coming home and she saw this above the car, or, and they're all now telling me because I'm that person. But when as I said at the beginning, when I was young, nobody told those stories. And if you did, you were mocked. So if all I've done is allow some of these people a slightly more open platform, even if it's not broadcast, even if it's just me and you on the phone, to allow you the ability to just be a bit more honest about what
you... A virtual safe haven.
Yeah. That if that's all I've done, then it's better than doing nothing, isn't it?
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
well, hey, I know we've been going for a little bit. I want to give you an opportunity though, because I think you mentioned it briefly earlier. You have a new film that you're working on. Do you want to talk just a bit about that?
Yeah. So I've got a few buddies. So on the back of my podcast, which is the Peer Beyond the Veil podcast, which obviously I worked on with you, um, we set up Peer Beyond Productions, which has kind of been looking at other kind of outlets of media, both kind of audio and visual. And so I was sitting having some drinks with some kind of old school buddies who are all kind of big fans of the podcast, but again, they're not really in this community as such. And we're sitting there, and one guy's mum's there, and she says, much as I was just saying, oh, did I ever tell you when I was young? I saw this. And so we're kind of sharing stories, and I'm sharing kind of anecdotes from the show, of the people I'd spoken to, people I've interviewed kind of over the time. And I've kind of got the room almost, like they're all listening, they're all answering me questions. It was the Mark Watson hour, that night. Everyone wanted to oh, well, what about this, or what about this? And one of my guys is, these are all old kind of school buddies. One of these guys runs his own, is effectively a contract cameraman, really good private freelance cameraman. The other runs a post-production and graphics business, and the other one is a touring sound musician. He's done work with Morcheeba, Fun Loving Criminals, who else? Happy Mondays, bunch of kind of bands, goes on tour with them and does all their sound production. The guy knows everything about sound production.
Awesome.
So I'm talking to these three guys who are just buddies. I've never really worked with any of them before. Now, I obviously come from the, I'll do the speaking, I'll do the writing,
right.
But the technical side of it, I couldn't make a movie. So I'm kind of saying, well, it would be really great because I'm now in touch with all these people I've met over the time, a friend of a friend, now on Facebook with her and Instagram with him. And I kind of have access to a billion more stories that I haven't actually yet tapped into through the podcast. So it would be great to kind of maybe do another round of this and try and speak to a whole load more people, especially with the developments in the last few years, as to kind of an updated version. And so my cameraman guy, says, Chris, his name is, I shouldn't call him a cameraman guy, says, well, we can make it a documentary. We can make it a documentary series at first, and then we thought, let's make it a feature. Let's make it a couple of hours, one-off film, documentary style, but a documentary feature, hour and a half, 2-hour film, so to speak. Fran, who's my post-production guy and graphics guy, is like, hey, do you know what? You need me. And we're like, well, we can't do any of it without the sound guys. So thankfully, all three of them said, brilliant, I'm on board. Sent me away to kind of put all the first pieces together. So yeah, I've been scouring through my contact book and the contact books of the people I know to pull together some really kind of exciting, some important names within ufological research. Primarily here in the UK, because I didn't want too much kind of Zoom footage in film, but some of the most exciting and important voices are coming from across the Atlantic in the US. So, I've relented slightly in the name of content over style. Stylistically, it's not as good, but it's like, well, hang on, it's more important to have them and sacrifice some of that design, and maybe not look as good, but to feature the voices it needs to feature, be of value. And so, we've got a few interviews wrapped already. I won't say much about them. A few more coming up over the kind of Christmas period. We've got some filming coming up in January and February. I'm working on getting to the UK. Again, I'll hold back from the name, but one of the big UK UFO expos is over here in February. Trying to get filming rights to go in there and kind of speak to. They've got a fascinating panel of people. Maybe film some of the talks themselves and obviously pull some of the speakers aside. And then hopefully by spring or so of next year, I don't know when this episode will be out, maybe we'll have wrapped by the time everyone's hearing me talk about this. We'll have put it together. Obviously, we'll go into post for a short while, it'll go into sound production for a short while, and then, give me 6 or 8 months. We'll have film. It's called... well, you can find it on my website's marklwatson.co.uk. All my nonsense is on there. The film's called Whether You Like It or Not, which is based on what I kind of keep saying to people, which is, I don't really care what you believe. It's true, whether you like it or not. And so that kind of kept that
Yeah.
stuck.
No,
So
I like it.
so yeah, we're going to look into distributors. I'm not sure entirely where you'll be able to find the finished movie at the moment. We're working on securing the right place to kind of put it out. But yeah, there'll be updates across my socials, and as I say, markelwatson.co.uk is my website, so there'll certainly be updates on there. Yeah, watch this space.
I mean, it sounds fantastic, and I know a little bit about it behind the scenes, but I won't say anything either. And I'll just say that from what I know, I'm excited to see it come out. And so, for anybody who's listening to this on the pod or watching on YouTube, you can check the description for Mark's website. I'm sure they can also find episodes of Peer Beyond the Veil there, as well as probably wherever you get podcasts at. It's
Pretty
probably
much
still out
everywhere.
there in
Yeah.
the ether.
And for anyone who is interested in anything which is not paranormal, which I know is maybe not our audience, I have a whole bunch of other bits and pieces. I've got a history podcast that I'm really proud of. It's the shortest history of Britain, so pertains a little bit more to this side of the pond, which really quickly summarizes like the entire history of Great Britain. Another one which I brought out last year called Double Helix, which explores the murky world of human genetics, looking at some really kind of really genuinely terrifying, because it is true and it is happening, and it's quite dystopian in its
Wow.
reality. The world of kind of biohacking and genetic modification of babies and some really horrible stuff, but it's all true. That's called Double Helix. Again, you can find that everywhere else. And I've got a bunch of fiction novels which are nothing to do with any of this, but you'll find it all on the website.
Well, that's fantastic. So again, make sure you check the description for the link to the website, but and it'll be there for you to get to. I want to thank Mark again for coming on the show. It's been a great conversation today. Time really flew, which is always good whenever you lose track of time because the conversation is so good. And for anybody who's listening who maybe has a question for Mark or whatever, please feel free to drop it in the comment section and I'll figure out a way to get it to him. So thanks again, Mark, for coming on the show, and really
Thank you so much for having me on the show, and thanks, Josh. As I said before, for looking after me in my early days of podcasting as well. So I have a lot to thank you for. So thank you, and thanks to your great audience. And yeah, hopefully I'll come back on and I can answer some of those.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'd love to have you back
Anytime.